this much detail on such a small scale? That's highly illogical. Here's your look at the new Hiya Toys, Star Trek the 2009 Exquisite mini-series, Spock. This brand new Spock figure stands 105 millimeters tall and faithfully reproduces his appearance from Star Trek 2009. He is dressed in his iconic blue uniform representing medical and science personnel. The Starfleet emblem on his clothes with the iconic Vulcan hand gesture. They are certainly not absent. Communicator, phaser, pistol, and other accessories are all finely detailed, capturing the essence of this character, even at the 1/18th scale. It's really hard to hide your feelings when you get a figure looking this good. Just though, before we get a closer look at the Hiya Star Trek 2009 Exquisite mini-series of Spock, I'd like to thank the folks over at Hiya. They were nice enough to, of course, provide the sample we could have a look at. This guy is slated to drop the third quarter of 2024, and if you've already seen my review of the Exquisite mini-series of James T. Kirk, thank you for that, by the way. Like with Kirk, though, this guy is also going to be getting the Exquisite Super Series treatment, also around November, for around $104.99. Though for this Spock, he's actually going to be standing at about 4 inches in height, or the second in command is looking at about 9.5 centimeters tall. I'm not going to move him out of his captain's role, but I'm at least going to move the figure over, so at least I could bring in the James T. Kirk that we've already had a look at. From a size standpoint, it looks like they are really using a lot of the same molds. Probably the legs are identical, but if you're putting the two back to back, it does look, though, that Captain Kirk is just a tad bit taller. Similar legs, similar accessories. In fact, identical accessories to the earlier looked at Kirk. Spock comes included with a view screen that also doubles up as well as a display stand. It still, though, has a problem of using clear pegs for their posts. I would imagine, though, that, well, if you are familiar with clear plastic is not really the kind of thing you want to use for a peg to attach onto a figure's feet, but either way, though, the peg is there, you can attach it onto Spock's. You can also, speaking of attaching, if you happen to have Kirk's display stand, you can attach the two together. If you're familiar with these and you already know where I'm going with this, there's these slots on the bottom. You can see them along the top. You can see them down the sides. You get two on either side, and you also get these eye brackets. This is now the second time I've done these, and I've noticed with both times, they're one of the tightest eye brackets I've ever had to contend with. Generally, for Hiya Toys, I don't have any problems when it comes to attaching display stands. Yet, though, for these eye brackets, I seem to have a harder time. Anyways, you can attach the two together, and just think of it this way. The more you get, the more bigger of a display base you have. I mean, it looks really just, again, like it's, Star Trek symbols on a screen. It would have been interesting, though, if they had found a way to make them look more like transporter pads. So it would make more logical sense. If you have several of these together, it would all look like they're standing on the transporter pad. Either way, though, you can just, again, take these. I'll just move this peg. Again, these pegs, really super tight. We'll move that off to the side. We'll come back to, I'm sure, a little bit later at the end of this review. The figure also, as well, comes with include the exact same Starfleet-issued belt. It so happens to be the same one that we got with Kirk. The one thing I didn't do, though, this time around is I didn't open up the belt, so I would wait for this review to show you guys what it looks like. So when you first get the belt, I mean, it's untouched. It hasn't even been opened yet. See, there's a little tab right here. The first time you do this is the first time I'm doing this right now. You think to yourself, that came off pretty easy, and I'm sure putting it back in will be just as easy until the moment you do it the first time. And I'm doing it for the first time. You can see, like that tab, when you're trying to fit it back into that hole, it bends the plastic every single time. And that's going to be a history, unfortunately, that's going to repeat itself, I'm sure, when we look at Bones as well. But you could do at least this. If you move Spock's body out of the way, at least his arms, you can take the belt and just sort of suggest the idea that it's around his waist. Don't tell anybody to look behind the figure, though, because they'll realize that you haven't even done up the belt. But from the front, at least, it gives you the idea that the belt is completely done up. I do really wish that they could have used a softer plastic. I do wish, though, that they probably could have used something other than using the way they've done it here. Maybe a peg that could have attached onto a post. I don't know. But it's not one of the easiest belts to do up. It does at least give you an opportunity to store his next accessories like the phase pistol and like the communicator. Similar, of course, to, well, again, identical to Kirk. The figure comes included with a communicator. The communicator is dark on one side. If you spin it around, though, you get the silver part there on the top. I'm just going to grab Kirk's here. These are very, very tiny. There's Kirk's. There's Spock's. You can see they're identical. Looks like eyes. These eyes, by the way, can be stored in his hand also. So if you don't want to have them necessarily holstered on the side, by the way, it sits right on the side holster here, or the little holder here. But you can also, of course, take that and can put it into his hands. Just don't drop it. It sits, but it sits really loose. There we go. You want to kind of put it in between his fingers and his thumb, and he holds it okay. He also can, of course, hold the he can hold the phaser. The problem with the phaser, though, is I can't really do anything right now until I change out the hand. Out of the packaging, Spock comes defaulted with his Vulcan gestured live long and prosper hand. He does have, though, a gripping hand. He does also have, by the way, a closed hand, so I don't know if I'm really going to be using those at all, but he does have, of course, the much more needed gripping hand, of course, if you want to have him displayed with the phaser. To take the hand, it's just going to be a case of removing it from the peg. And then we'll take the new hand and we'll just attach this onto the peg. Not the easiest thing, I will say. Not the easiest thing at all to get in place. The problem with it, though, is that the peg is so small. The easiest thing I found, and even then saying this is not the easiest thing at all, but just sort of twist it. Twist it as you're putting it on the peg. And just hope that you've got it all the way on there, which I think I do. Then you can take yourself the phaser. The phaser will slide into his hand. I know we didn't really spend a lot of time looking at the phaser. I'll show you guys what that looks like in a second. So communicator one hand, phaser on the adjacent hand. That's what it looks like with the phaser, by the way. I like the phaser other than just the, I know I said this already, except for the front being the part that flips around. So on the back, I don't know if you can actually see it. It looks like there's a little bit of red that they've added to it. Am I just seeing that, or is it actually there? And then the front part looks like it's been set to stun. Let's take those out right now, and we'll just put them off to the side. They're such small accessories, I know I'm going to be losing them. Let's take off the belt, and we'll also put that off to the side too. And getting a closer look at Spock. I feel like the same thing I said for Kirk will be the same thing I say for Spock. Good likenesses. Zachary Quinto, I believe, is the gentleman that was playing Spock in all those 3 films. I think the likenesses are there. I think the only thing that lets these figures down is the coloring that they chose for the skin color. I feel, if anything, they should be a little bit darker. I think I mentioned this with Kirk, like the coloring was okay, but it was way too light, and he had a fair bit of pink on the front of his face. Spock sort of follows that same suit by also adding, I feel like, just way too light of a skin tone for his face. The likeness is there, but I feel like the paint maybe lets it down just a little bit. Of course, they've painted in the eyebrows well. For the eyes as small as they are, too, I think they've done a decent job there as well. And you can see that they painted the lips. No paint problems at all, other than just really the paint being too light on the figure. Of course, for his tunic, Spock's got himself a blue tunic this time around. Has still the Star Trek symbol there in the top corner. He has the panel lining of lighter blue added in there as well. Nowhere you'll see on this figure is the tiny little Star Trek symbols. One of my least favorite assets of the Star Trek uniforms is the fact they had to add those little tiny symbols. This, by the way, is still using a softer plastic. And again, probably one of the reasons why they're using the softer plastic, even though really, like, if you're looking at the torsos, the outfits are exactly the same. But it's probably just so that it'd be a lot easier to tool that rather than tooling a body straight from scratch. But yes, it does seem like the arms are the same, except for the lower part of the arms. Obviously, Kirk has three stripes on his sleeves. Spock only has just the 2. The hands also look like they're using very similar style of hands, clearly using also the same lower legs and the same style of boots. Because of that, also, Spock has the exact same levels of posability. The figure does have, first of all, I would say necessarily a ball joint where it's a head and a neck as separate pieces. What you're doing, though, is when you're moving the neck, you're moving the head as well. But both of them are on a ball joint. The ball joint is actually tucked beneath the tunic collar piece. So again, when you're moving it up and down, you can kind of feel like it moves a little bit at the top of the shoulder. You can also rock it back and forth there as well. You can rotate the head all the way around. Being that they're also using ball joints, I suppose if you want to have some fun, if you have a figure of similar size, you probably could just pop the head off Spock and replace it with another figure, which is probably what they're probably going to be doing with other Exquisite minifigures. The arms rotate all the way around. You can also bring the arms out at about 90 degrees. There's a single hinge only in the elbow, but it allows at least the forearm to rotate back and forth. The hands, careful. Don't want those to fall off the peg. Do rotate back and forth, whether you want to use this hand or you want to use the Live Long and Prosper hand. Again, they attach the exact same way. Upper torso. I noticed with Spock, his torso moves a lot freer than Kirk's did. Underneath, though, all that, behind the scenes, below the curtain, you can actually see, I don't know if you can see it or not, it's attaching there by a ball joint. So it does do a fair good movement, being able to rotate the figure all the way around. Legs split out, ball joints there, yeah. You can bring the legs forward, you can bring the legs back. One thing I didn't actually really talk too much about when it came to Kirk, and I'll mention it here for Spock, is that they have the drop-down legs. I don't imagine that they're probably going to be releasing vehicles at any later date, but if they did, probably will help to aid the figures to sit. I mean, they sit okay as they are, but you can also drop the legs down to give a little bit of a space here so the legs kick a little higher than before. And then you just pop the legs back in place. Still get the splits. You still get a swivel there at the top of the thigh, double hinge on the knee, articulation in the boots, articulation in the ankle, and a rocker there as well. Spock looks good. Spock actually, both him and Kirk have looked good. The only thing, again, I would say is when looking at these figures, let's just bring back in Kirk. I guess probably should have used the display stands for these. The two figures, while still using, I'm sure, a lot of the same molds, the only thing that really does give Kirk a little bit more of the height is probably the hair on the top of his head, if anything. While still using the same bodies, what we end up landing here with is some decent looking Star Trek figures. Truth be told, yes, I think the likenesses probably could have been just a little bit better had the scale been a little bit larger. But considering that really that these are 1/18 scale, I think Hiya's knocking out of the park when it comes to sculpting. Truth be told, though, I think the coloring of the skin probably could have been a little bit darker, both for Kirk and Spock. I feel the skin complexion is way too light, and also adding some of the pinks that they added to Kirk maybe takes some of the features away from his face that it doesn't look as much like Pine. But I think in both the cases it does look like the actors. The accessories, again, are going to be still the same. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing at all, considering that they're both part of Starfleet, that they also have matching Starfleet issued weapons, and of course the belt. Speaking again of the belt, the only thing is, again, like the way they've handled the belt here, it's not the easiest thing that once you get this detached, and I knew this was going to happen, once you get it detached, this belt never seems to close properly again. I wish that they could have fixed this, and maybe they might be able to fix this moving forward with some of the future figures we may get from the Star Trek universe. I still remember first being introduced to Zachary Quinto on the TV show Heroes and saying loudly, you know, if they ever were to reboot the Star Trek universe, he would be my pick for Spock. Several years later, and then being able to rub that in everybody's faces, we did get ourselves a decent Quinto Spock, although the films themselves for this J.J. Abrams Star Trek universe leave something to be desired. The first one I liked, the last one was good, the middle one sort of just did a lot of fan service and unnecessary introducing Khan when I didn't think Khan needed to be the big bad guy so early on. What we get, though, here for Hiya Toys is essentially these characters scaled down to 1/18 scale. What we're getting here with Spock is a pretty good likeness to Zachary Quinto, short of maybe perhaps the skin complexion being a tad bit too light. It's still one of the issues that I had also with Kirk. Not that the likenesses weren't there, but I feel like the likenesses may perhaps be lost a little bit by the way that the paint was handled. The head sculpts, though, being as good as they are, the figure bodies as well are using the exact same from Kirk to Spock, and I would imagine they're probably going to be doing the same with Bones too. Not necessarily a bad thing. I always feel like if a company can get mileage from a mold and we get more characters from resulting of that, then that's not a bad thing at all. Both of them do still have the problems with the belt. As you saw in this big review, I hadn't even touched the belt. I decided to leave it off until I finally hit record. You guys probably saw the struggles that I had behind the scenes trying to get the belt to close shut. Once you do it the first time, you're never going to really get the belt shut. I think really honestly they could have used just a peg with a hole on the back of the belt. Or again, you could just do what I do, just cheat. Just sort of use the Kobayashi maneuver, and then just sort of close the belt partially. So anybody from the front would think that you've done it up properly. Anyone looking at it from the back would know that you just totally cheated. If you guys are interested, though, like I said, this guy, like with Kirk, is slated to drop the third quarter of 2024. Like also with Kirk, mentioned earlier, this guy's going to also get an Exquisite Super Series. So if you are one that doesn't collect as much of the 1/18 scale, but you're really more interested in the Exquisite Super Series and what Hiya is doing so well with that line, you're also going to be getting a Kirk. You're also going to be getting a Spock of that size too. Big thank you once again to the folks over at Hiya Toys that did provide the sample of the brand new J.J. Abrams Star Trek 2009 series. This was the Exquisite series, the Exquisite mini-series of Spock. If you guys did enjoy this video, do it us all. You want to throw it a like? You guys want to stick around for more so? I hope so, because we are also going to be looking at Bones. Going to resist the need to swear in that review. But yeah, his review will be right around the corner. You want to make sure that you're coming back here. And of course, let me know down below in the comment section what you guys thought of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek universe. Did you like the films? And of the three, which one was the best? Let me know. If you, again, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.